everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Welcome to my house for poetry. Thank you. That's serious. And we're also here to celebrate the publication of two books. I'm Cara Clark, a literary agent at Wholesaler Literary and Elspeth is a creative writer and fashion working across poetry and two books typically in the first pamphlet. Her work has been shortlisted to the Manchester Prize and the Chinese right now. Her background in social research, particularly gender studies and public health, is something she actively uses in her creative practice. She is passionate about making creative writing truly accessible and is a co-founder of the Writing Passionate Interest. So give it up for Elspeth. So, Elspeth, would you like to describe the two books and what inspires you to write it? Yeah, can everyone hear me okay? Perfect, thank you. Cool, so yeah, I guess to describe it, I feel like I often say it's about first love in all its forms because it kind of is about sexuality and coming of age and romance a little bit, but it's also a lot about friendship, which is something that I love to write about. And I kind of feel like we're starting some more writing about it, but traditionally obviously hasn't like necessarily been celebrated as much in poetry. So that's like a form of love that I really like to write about. And also I think at kind of like a formative age, there's a lot of blurring of boundaries between different kinds of love anyway. So hopefully that captures it. I suppose what inspired me to write it, I actually wrote this started writing this pamphlet in 2019, 2020. So it's a funny thing with with like writing a book, in that you often kind of have had quite a long time when it gets published. Obviously, I think all the other writers will know that only too well. So when you're like asking what inspired it, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I think it was just sort of a vibe in my life at the time. But I mean, I was playing a lot of Sims over lockdown, and I think that I started writing about The Sims, and then that kind of got me thinking like actually The Sims was like a huge thing in my life, probably between the ages of about 10 and 18. Like it was massive, and it was like really the first place that I told stories and like inspired my creativity. And I guess from that sort of little like nugget, then a lot of other themes that kind of came from that sort of had like maybe I thought about because I was thinking about like that sort of particular form of kind of moment.
Yeah, oh, I love that. I really relate well. Twilight book someplace. And
so the book is also excitingly published by a new press publishing for some really brilliant work. And so do you want to tell us a bit more about the collaboration? Yeah, definitely. So they were kind of set up by Rebecca Kenny, who's a really lovely person and a great poet, because she actually had an accident and sort of like had this moment where she was thinking about what she really wanted to do with her life. And she basically decided that she wanted to run a press that was really inclusive, had a really open ethos, and was really transparent, because I think something about poetry is it can not necessarily be like the most transparent place in terms of how to get published and seeing some nods and things like it's not necessarily always so easy to see from the outside if you don't have a lot of connections. And she wanted to kind of be really clear about that. And also there's for people who don't know, there can often be a bit of like paid to play in poetry, where you're like spending lots of money to submit to journals, submit to competitions. So she wanted there to be a place where submissions were always free and poets make, have a profit share from their book, etc. And so yeah, so the collaboration came about because I just thought, as I said, they're like a disabled and queer-run press, and I was just really interested in their ethos, and they had an open call for submissions, and then I submitted and kind of went from there. But having said that, I don't want to create a sort of false impression about like it was all plain sailing. I feel like all writers have a lot of rejection, and like this collection was rejected from presses. Like sometimes like I think people just didn't relate to it at all, and that's kind of fine too. So just to say, like, I feel like it's been really lovely seeing readers connect to the work in here, but like that like there's often a lot of rejection along the way to get to that point. So kind of try and be open and honest about that, because otherwise I feel like you see other people's publication journey and you're like, oh, that's so great they got published, but like this can seem like it happened, you know, like overnight, and actually that ended up taking that like not really the case for any of these. So yeah, it was a journey.
Oh,
Yeah, definitely. I think I will start with the first poem. It's called Will I Ever Have as Much Fun Again as I Did Sleepovers age 14? We were up all night, question after question flooded from my lips, as tight as Samuel yawned. To sink to a tiredness so the night could stretch on without horizon and not just on repeat in my mind. Waves of words crashed against my teeth. I didn't mind what the answers were, just wanted to keep you talking. So yeah, that's the first poem in this section, which I feel like kind of sets some of the tone. And this poem I'm going to read next is a little further on, but I wanted to read this one because I feel like it's kind of like similar in vibe. I don't actually write in sort of formal poetry that much throughout this collection, but this is one of the ones that is in a particular form. So it's a series of haikus, which are poems, for anyone who doesn't know, where there are 3 lines, and the first line has 5 syllables, the second has 7 syllables, and the third has 5 syllables. And I sometimes quite like that constraint, because I feel like, especially if you're trying to like distill a really like sort of like tangible memory, like that constraint can like sort of really distill it, which I think is, yeah, nice. So this poem is called Last Birthday Before 13. Screams kept me awake, hot chocolate still, staining chubby cloud smiles. Decorating pens, drawing you on my pillow so we would touch. Newest girl at school, invited to sleepover, had to choose a bed. And then I'll read 2 more. I can say 1 more. I'll read this poem. It's one of the first poems I wrote in this collection. And this is an unusual experience for me, because I'm usually quite a big editor and I edit a lot, but this poem I literally just wrote it on the notes after my phone one night and then like never edited it again. It's like an amazing experience for me. And I wish it happened more often, because I was just really happy with it. It's called Wildfires Burn Across Australia as Edward Cullen takes his shirt off for the 20th time. 1,000 miles away, a country burns as we decide it's time for a twilight marathon. Silvery moon, cold skin in my heart as Bella moves from Phoenix, Arizona, making me see climate refugees even in my YA. We cannot see the flames, like bees we are asleep, smoked out, impervious to our home dissolving. Jacob says to Edward, I'm hotter than you, which is true, but not all things that are true are heard. New moon, breaking dawn, light still crawling, but as the sun cracks its yolk on our popcorn husk, the dead weight in my stomach is undying. I am caught an apple wishing its pits will still be seeded, find ground on which to live, that the venomous bite of rubbish, of sewage, of the crushed snail, of the dead wasp on the pavement is not eternal, that the sharp pains in my chest will be eclipsed by action, my own included, and that it was okay, forgive me, to watch Bella and Edward get their happy ending whilst the country burned. And I guess the last time I'll read in this segment kind of is on a similar theme of climate crisis. I often find pop culture is quite a useful way to write into really difficult topics, because I think firstly it provides a way in as a writer, because if you're like, I want to write about climate crisis, it's almost like so overwhelming that I think it's like, yes, sort of can be really, really anxiety inducing. And also I think it's kind of like the same for a reader. So I feel like it's a way of sort of like telling it slant, but also like finding a way in slant. So this is called Flash Floods Kill 6 People the Day Sabrina was remade. A lot has changed on set. My aunt's faces have shifted and Salem can move fluidly. Ambrose is better looking and Harvey is actually a teenager. There's a show in the neighboring town with a high incidence serial killer. But what I mostly notice is the season. The sun echoes my brittle blonde hair, a dry heat freckled damp neck that felt like vegetables in plastic bags. No one mentions it on the solstice when blood mixes with wine, a cocktail that goes straight to our feet makes them dance with the devil. Dad crashes the party. No one mentions it when my hair turns a whiter shade and everyone thinks I've dyed it, like it's not 104 degrees out there. No one mentions it. The wind ruffled through Greendale a grasping cat's tongue. The heat must have turned up incrementally day by day, otherwise someone would have noticed it. Because if they'd noticed it, they'd have done something right. Right?
And so what perspectives do you want to explore? Was it the sort of state of mind you had at the time, or rather than looking back from where you are now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually got asked to write the first essay I've been asked to write on poetry recently, which like I guess is like on poetic, which people don't know is sort of like I guess like what you bring to poetry and what you think of poetry when I first had the word and the words were kind of like no I should have. But it made me think about this person because I was kind of writing about how I think that like writing about your formative years and especially experiences that were maybe painful or confusing can like be a chance to revisit and be cathartic, but it's also more than that. It's kind of like a reimagining of this like thinking about the way things are different as well. And I think what's interesting about poetry, I think it's quite often the same about songwriting, is that people assume that poetry is like you 100%, but actually there's a lot of fiction in poetry as well, and maybe there'll be truth but not fact, if that makes sense. I think Caroline Burr, the poet, says that, you know, like everything is true but there's no fact. And I think that that's something I kind of wanted to bring, like different perspectives, like maybe some of the poems are very autobiographical and some of them it's like, yeah, like a reimagining and hopefully sort of the past and hopefully also kind of like seeing glimpses of a different future. So that makes sense. And
and I love all the pop culture references throughout, obviously from Twilight to Taylor Swift. So I've noticed that somehow she is reissuing Speak Now.
Yeah.
And you have a poem called Speak Now, and I know you manifested the album, which is probably the right word. And do you feel like it feels in a way that all these sort of fandom and like pop culture in general from the etc., that they kind of form a part of an identity in the way that even sexuality in some way of queerdom or girlhood are part of, you know, young people growing up. And so is that how you felt that, you know, all these sort of parts of you, like all your
yeah, definitely. Like I say, I think especially with Sims is like such a strong part of my identity. It became like this intense special interest where I always, my mum and dad are here tonight, and I always used to like regale them whenever we met and walk about like any hours of what I've been up to with my Sims that day, and like what my Sims family is doing. They were very patient about it. So like I say, I think it was like a big part of like learning to be able to tell a story, and also I think that if you're exploring aspects of your identity, like you might not necessarily be out in whatever way, like being like I'm neurodivergent or I'm queer or whatever it might be, but you might be like, oh, I'm a huge fan of the Sims, and other people might be into that, you know, what they will about different things. And I think so, yeah, I think so. And also I'm just really interested in like pop culture and fandoms in general. I think especially because they're often associated with like youth and femininity, in particular, and like can often be very derided because of that. So I think that's something that like I'm really interested in writing about a lot of the time. I think when we talk about ekphrastic poetry with like the name of poetry written after art, it's often traditionally like seen as, you know, after a painting, like a poem inspired by a painting or something which is more considered like high art, but actually so much of what I love in poetry is when it's like, yeah, quite grounded and accessible and there's a way into it. And I think that's what I find anyway with pop culture and writing culture.
And is it hard to write about pop culture?
I would say, for me, I don't think so, because I guess that's the type of culture that I'm actually like into, you know what I mean? Like I think it would be much harder for me to write it about, I don't know, like bringing something to that I wasn't interested in, because I'd be like that's great if that is your passion, like you're really like, moved by that. And if I was, I'm sure like if I saw painting it's really cool, like could write something about it. But for me, like I think poetry is like a way of like exploring life and figuring out what you think about things. So in a way, like it's really nice to kind of like do it through pop culture, because I think for me it gives like that pop culture like an additional life. And also I think writing about fantastical worlds, whether that's sort of in pop culture world, you kind of make them, there's something new as well. It's not exactly like you've just written about a poem about Twilight, but like with fan fiction, you've written something new, which becomes like a new form of art in itself.
Oh, I love that. And I hope you're going to read this answer, but your poem, The It One, it's probably one of my favorite in the collection. And I feel that anyone who's really felt a cognitive dissonance between how they feel on the inside and how this sort of ableist, heteronormative society tells you should be feeling, can really relate. And sort of why was it important for you to show that part of growing up as well, of that disconnect and figuring out the difference?
I think because like as you get older, you sort of like become a bit of like a parental figure to your younger self as well, if that makes sense. And like you sort of start to see things that maybe you couldn't fully understand at the time, or as you say, there's parts of you that were maybe like had to be excised a bit in society in a certain way. So I feel like, that was important for me to kind of, I suppose, as I was saying before, like write about that and have like a redemptive aspect of that. And also I suppose just for me, like I do find like writing poetry really healing. I don't think necessarily all the poetry I write, which is about more vulnerable aspects, need to be shared with the world. Like I think you can write a lot of poetry about things that you can just keep to yourself, and that's absolutely fine. There can be a bit too much of an emphasis on, needing to share everything, which is great if it works for you. But I always think that especially for like poets who are new, like it's good to be encouraged to consider what you want to keep to yourself. But like obviously some of that, I feel like that poem to me, The Economy of Love, which I will read, it just felt like I was like, oh, like I hope this doesn't sound egotistical, but I was like, I would have really liked to read that poem when I was like younger me, like just like knowing that I could have written a poem about that, and sort of like knowing that you're safe and you made it, I think is like a nice place to be writing back from some of the difficult things when you're younger, rather than like writing into the trauma. Sorry, some of this is like, it's hard always to articulate like why you've made creative decisions. I hope it's interesting and makes sense.
No, it is. And I think there is this trend of oversharing in a way that's sometimes and doesn't feel, you sort of, as soon as you publish something out there, it's not really yours anymore. And it's everyone else's. And so it's good to hold that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's useful to think about, like, to put something away for a while and like come back to it as well and see what you really want to share and like what's it in service of, and like how do you feel about it.
And obviously I mentioned that you were shortlisted for the Manchester Prize, and a lot of your writing, both here and sort of elsewhere in your other pieces of prose, sort of is so much about nature and a sense of place. And obviously you address the sort of challenges of living and creating during the climate crisis. How do you sort of grapple with that as a creator?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is difficult. I guess one of the ways that I grapple with it, as I was saying, is kind of having ways into it and writing about it in a way that I feel like people can maybe stay with, because I'm sure we've all had the experience of like engaging with art where it like maybe feels like too much, and actually I feel like if it's something that people can stay with, then that can be more impactful. That's been my experience with the reader. And I guess also like just by trying to like maintain hope, and I think that's something I think about quite a lot in terms of like the shape of the work that I produce. So like whether it's prose or poetry, like trying to leave the reader with hope, and like because otherwise I think like there's not, there isn't really any change without hope as well. So, and like that's something that I'm interested in kind of different capacities, like writing about joy in the gaps and thinking about how do you find moments of joy and happiness in like a traumatized body, whether that's personally or whether that's like living in an era of climate crisis. So I think trying to write about it a lot, and I guess I sort of do that as a writer for me personally, but also like in a way that is not like there can't be change, because I think there can be change. I think there definitely can be. Like, hopefully like in very small ways and write about them.
I really love that. So for now we're joined to hear from Andres and Ordery to join us to read a few poems as well. Andres is a queer Latinx writer based in Edinburgh. His writing maps the journey of his diasporic experience and unpacks what it means to be from the Midea. He has been published widely, including in The Guardian, The Skinny, 40 Poems, Gutter, and Wasafiri. His writing has been shortlisted for the Saltire Society's Poetry Book of the Year, the Morley Prize for Unpublished Writers of Colour, and the Mosu Charan Prize. He is the author of the poetry collection At Least This I Know, from which he'll be reading, published by Forbrain, and his debut novel, How We Named the Stars, forthcoming in 2024.
Hello, thank you so much, Elspeth, for inviting me. Congratulations on your template. I'm gonna start with a poem about childhood, because I like the discussions we're having about looking back at our younger selves. This is Photograph. Summer light blinds my mother, 27, with golden ponytail, curls set by that pink can of Aquanet. In her cradled arms, me and my sister, aged 6 and 4, the three of us sit still in an English garden. Rose bushes adorn us as a tree awakens its seasonal blossoms, the sun feeding us its warmth. Proper ladies sniff sprays of begonia while observing our every move. Around us, nature is neatly ordered. We are three strangers in that place. We wear shorts and windbreakers, Nike high-top trainers. We always stood out in that way, with father and brother directing from the other side of a lens. A photo can tell so much. Mother squinting, sister posing, brother missing, father too, me burrowing deep into the earth. Yeah, I tried to pick poems that I felt sort of speak in symbiosis with Elspeth's pamphlet. And so this is a poem about love, but unrequited love. It's one I like to perform quite a bit because I wrote it during we as humans create many pandemics. I don't know if you realize this. This is based on a true story. I don't know if there's many facts in it, but it was written during swine flu when I met a man on a plane. This is Newark Liberty International Airport. In a departure lounge in the state of New Jersey, the least beautiful one, that's where I first saw you. You were older than me with beautiful blue eyes lined with circles like a trunk of sequoia. Your name Adam, meaning to be red, meaning to make made from dirt, like the first man, Adam, my first man, Adam, my man-made fantasy. While the plane taxied, you asked me questions of my travels to come while I made up our story, blurring our present and future with the memories of your hands, tracing our timeline together, tracing the outline of our love. I dreamt of our first good morning as the sun rose above the Pacific, as the sun shone brightly on your face, as I imagined you kissing me. We talked between the midnight hours over a meal which I could not say was breakfast or dinner, but would be our first together. At the baggage carousel, I would bump into you, tired but still enamored, happy to see your familiar face. I would want to be braver, want to invite you to my room, want to feel your hand span the time zone of my body. But I'd simply say goodbye as you kissed me on the cheek and wished me well, waving me off into the ether. You see, I once met an Adam seated next to me on a plane, introduced myself to him, did nothing to become his Eve. This is my penultimate poem. The last one from the collection, and then I'm gonna read a new one for you. This poem I wrote as a commission to celebrate 10 years of Summer Hall. which is amazing. If you've never been, it used to be the Royal Dick Veterinary School. It's just Downs away. They are great. They support lots of creatives in Edinburgh and wider throughout Scotland and during the Fringe throughout the world. What was weird was they celebrated 10 years during deep dark lockdown. So this was written almost from a place of nostalgia. I live about a 5-minute walk from Summer Hall and I'm regularly there. And this, yeah, it's a bit of my memory of it. This is We Are Young and Still Have Time. 1. Heat on skin as the sun bores down on wood varnished by sticky sweet cider. Air smelling of spring, summer in the distance, I smile at you while soaking up the promise of a day. 2. We walk side by side along the gallery wall with its monochrome photos of distant cities. We say how we will go there someday, and we believe it because we are young. 3. Currying in among the dim candlelight pressed up against the foggy glass alcove, seasons changing, the patio a distant memory. We laugh about this as we toast the year. 4. Friday night, I wait for you on the steps, 10 minutes to go until the band starts up. We've missed the pre-show pint, no bother. Really, I just want your company in the dark. 5. Music blares from speakers stacked like Lego as strobe lights cast blue-violet filters on our skin. The throng of revelers fall and rise against the stage. The band, they are like ministers preaching to the masses. 6. Over the bass and drum, I whisper, I love you, and through the snare you mouth, I'm glad you're here. All around us, the future feels bright and never ending. We believe it because we are young and still have time. Thank you. This is my last poem, if I can get it open. I've been working away on what I hope might be a follow-up collection, if I can finally settle down on what that manuscript is. And this poem was inspired by another poet. So this is Empty Words after Zafar Kunil. Volver, volver, or a doubled returning. I hear not gente, but papa, to where I ask. Each Sunday the Father commanded, go in peace to love and serve. Outside, finches always greeted us. In Latin America, some use vosotros, opposite of we, a collective you, but all I hear in vos is vos, your voice. Papa always said, if you don't believe, you don't receive. And did that mean gifts, Christ, or love, synonym? My mother's land is desert and sand, Chihuahua like agua, but water is a scarce word for a dry mouth. I was born between the border of two silent places, my mother's dreaming, my father's prayer. Under April sun, I play with dandelions, all fluff, no roar. My father shouts, ball, ball, ball. In baseball, we run diamonds, and I wonder if I'll ever shine as brightly as a ruby. July 4th, the sun. It's baseball or baseball, not besos, which my father always gives me. Masculinity isn't the opposite of love. To hear me as I should, I say undressed, like undressed, which is to bear myself in a foreign tongue. My mom slips all her tongues in one, ese pendejo, ese cabrón, ese pinche troublemaker. I could write 1,000 essays on that. My father is twice removed, American by way of Jalisco, by way of Zacatecas, a history more storied than we knew. I was the middle child, an A in the middle of two S's, my siblings, two S's, propagated by our parents. Salvador, Sonia, Salvador, Andres, Salisa, decades later, surprise E, Enrique. Prayer is not the words, but receiving none and still believing in poetry. This is callback. The crack of hide against wood. The crowd is roaring, and I'm enveloped in that sea of dandelions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So audience questions, we're going to come to you very soon. So please prepare some questions for Elspeth. But in the meantime, the lovely Sarah Stewart will read us some poems. She is a Keats Shelley Prize finalist, and her poetry has been widely published and anthologized, most recently in the Oxford Magazine and Best Scottish Poems. Her first pamphlet, Glesk, won the Callan MacDonald Memorial Award. So please give up for Sarah.
Hello everyone. I just want to thank Elspeth. It's such a joy to be here, and also to read as well. I'm going to read a few poems from my pamphlet book, and we were listening to Elspeth talking about the difference between truth and fact. I'm really interested in that kind of fuzzy memory, what's real, what's invented in poetry. So I'm going to read Poem to Close, which kind of touches on the Arctic Arms, Dundee. Sociologists claim our quality of life peaked in 1978, the year Archie Gemmill scored a World Cup goal for Scotland. Sony invented the Walkman. Superman was playing in cinema. That summer, my parents went into a pub, ordered 2 pints. We don't serve pints to ladies, the barman said. My mother did not flinch. Coolly, she asked for 2 halves, decanted them into a pint glass. I like to picture her, backlit by the jukebox in the pub's smoky fog, raising that tarnished gold to her lips. This is blood. In Superdrug, security had grabbed a woman about my age, all skinny jeans and freckles. She's screaming, "It's for my daughter, you cunt!" And I believe her. Stuffed inside her jacket are boxes of tampons. She's kicking and writhing so hard the deep veins of her neck bulge. And I'm not the only woman who steps forward saying, "Just let her go, please, I can pay for them." But they wave us away. The police arrive, clean-shaven boys with sweaty foreheads, and cuff her into silence. As the van doors slam, I think of her daughter, imaginary or not, wadding toilet paper between her thighs, afraid to leave the house. Quick one about public humiliation, because that's always good when you're reading in front of an audience. It's for anyone who plays a musical instrument and has tried to do it in public and you mess it up. The Dalry Road Piano Showroom. They were closing for the day, the sales girl said. Off limits, no exceptions, no chance. But my man had a southern drawl, could talk his way into anything. She waved us through. I took a baby grand, white as a new tooth. Memorized Chopin, poured like milk, until I tripped, bucking and cantering to the end. I never liked that bastard extended trill. The salesgirl smirked. My cowboy looked diminished. I struck the minor third and snuck off with him. All that night it rained, and I traced my mistakes up and down his spine. 4th finger, 2nd finger, 3rd finger, trill. Thank you. Here's my last poem. This is a true story. I would not marry into that house. I couldn't condemn my unconceived children to their strange bloodline. Oddly shaped ears, a mad uncle, small boys packed off to Eton, and an imperious matriarch reigning over the tea table, God the mother loved to bake. I was suspicious of her flirtation with domesticity, seeing as they had staff. but she was a pro with the first incision, opening up Victoria's sponge like a neurosurgeon, and she'd wave that knife in the air if she disliked the conversation. I marveled at her gift for turning near myth into legend. He almost rode for Oxford, you know. Jones practically climbed Everest in '92. Years later, I found a photo of her, grinning for the camera at a gleaming tea table. I told the story to so many, this incredibly rich family, that I could barely recall how much of it was theirs and how much mine. I confess, the mater held no scalpel in the shop. The light was kind, the cakes appeared delicious, and all their ears looked fine.
So much. So I have some questions, but is there anyone in the audience who has a question for Elspeth? Raise your hand, please. Okay, I'm going to get you started with a question from me, but then keep thinking. Thank you. And so we've heard a few of your poems, and I feel that the titles are like stories in themselves. How do you choose the title? Does it come first? Does it come at the end?
Yeah, I think titles are quite tricky. I feel really lucky that the titles in this collection came quite naturally, and like the collection that I'm writing or just finished is like the titles are like one word. They're not really different. I think with this, like, yeah, it's a mix. Sometimes they came fast, but often not. Often like I'll have, when I'm writing, I'll have like 5 titles at the beginning, be like title, like I'll write something like slash slash slash, like, so there's lots of different ones, and then I can pick them. Like with the Edward Cullen one that I read, that title was there, but like I wrote it, like I literally wrote it and then I wrote the poem, but then like there's a poem in here called 60% of bisexual people are in psychological distress at any one time. And that poem was like, I don't even remember what it's called. It's called like one word. Like it's called like The Garden or something. And then it became that. So, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, I sort of want a title. Like that title isn't really like the poem. I'll have to be the poem. The poem's quite be quite different from the title. So sometimes I think it depends what vibe you want. You want to have like a little bit of a like shock almost in that, or like turn the poem. The title turns the poem, I think. Like it really turns the poem. So, yeah.
So, have you warmed up for questions? Yes, you over there.
I think you mentioned like vampire kind of media or the undead, undying.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, is there a deeper meaning to what is it you attach to that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, I think the vampire is really interesting. I feel like I want to have like a really good answer to that, but I feel like it's more potentially a feeling. I know that Cunning Folk magazine has a vampire issue coming out this year, and they've got like a quote like the vampire is so kind of interesting to us because like they're almost so close to human, and I think that's something that I'm like quite obsessed with, like sort of mortality. And I've got a poem in here about called Forever With You, which is sort of like about that question of like sort of mortality and like, yeah, and I guess like youthfulness. Like I often think like people often say like, oh, when you were young you don't like, you feel like nothing can ever harm you, or like never, like death is so far away. But I feel like when I was a teenager I was like scared of dying all the time, which probably tells you quite a lot about my personality. So I feel like I've often had this tendency to like sort of think a lot about like mortality, and then obviously grew up in a time where the vampire was very in vogue. And I'm also really interested, because it's like not quite the same vibe, but I'm very interested in this idea that like mythical creatures can go in and out of fashion. Like it'll be like, oh, the vampire had its moment, we can't have any more vampire books. And I'm always like, why not? The vampires evergreen. Like literally, like I think that's quite interesting to me. Like I feel like I write a lot about, like there's werewolf mentions in here too, and I've always kind of remained interested in like, lots of different like folklore and different creatures, even though I do think there is like, if in publishing this idea like this creature will have like a vogue and then it can't come back again. And I'm like, no.
It's currently witches.
Yeah. But then like it's like at some point they'll be like witches are over.
Oh,
it's
we're
like
done.
it's very odd. So I guess it's also a little bit of a challenge to that. Like I just want to break that.
So the one that I've heard of London Book Fair is the Monster Erotica. So it's like erotica with dinosaurs. So keep an eye out for that. That's the new one. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yes.
You said you're quite a big expert.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, definitely. There's a poet called Rachel Lewis who really taught me that editing is fun. I think that editing to me is writing. Like I think that sometimes we can see it as different things, but actually they're not. They're all part of the same process, to me at least. I think in terms of my process, I was saying earlier, I think that there's a lot of value in leaving poems to one side for as long as possible. I think that's both for your own sake to see, is this a poem I kind of wrote because I wanted to like post something for myself? Is this a poem I want to do something more with? But also because like it's amazing what you can't see when you're like so close to it. Like, even really like glaring like mistakes, like you wrote the same word intentionally, like line after line. Like there's a lot that your brain can just get used to like that if you don't give yourself time. So I think giving myself a lot of time, and then I'm also as a writer, I really love feedback, but I think it's really important to kind of think about whose feedback you value. Like there's no point asking someone their opinion on your work if you don't actually value their opinion. So I have like, well, Caro often gives me feedback, which is very valuable. And I have a few like trusted friends who I would ask for feedback. And so I think that I often think about editing. For me, the idea of editing is like taking the poem as far as I can take it. And then when I think I can't take it any further, then I ask for feedback, and then I go back into the edit again with that feedback. But I think that you can take a poem pretty far on your own, but it usually can be taken further, especially like a series of poems, because I think that there's a lot to think about in terms of order and things. So those are also other things that there's this sort of way of editing, an individual poem, and then there's the way of editing a collection. So with something like this, I edit each poem, so like I'm happy with each poem first. And then I start to think about the order. And then obviously once you change the order, you might edit the poem a little bit more. But like, I think it's a bit easier for me anyway to work with editing a pamphlet or a collection as a whole once you've kind of got the poem like line by line, like you're happy with it. And I also feel like everything should be earning its place in a poem. I think a lot of my poems can be quite short, but I think that is because I edit quite a lot as well. Like, not saying that like longer poems can also obviously be edited. Like I do feel like sometimes they start long. I think does that making poems get shorter and shorter.
And how do you put together a collection? Do you like wait to have a wealth of poems and then try to find a thread that goes through them, or do you write with the collection in mind?
No, I think I can be quite obsessional, like in a good way for writing at least, because I think I'll get like a thing like this where I was like, oh, I'm writing loads about the Sims. I'm writing loads about the Sims. Oh, now I'm writing a lot about these adjacent thoughts and feelings that the Sims have brought up, and then it expands into that. Or the collection I just finished is probably much more like there is a lot of nature in here. It's much more like nature focused. So I think that for me anyway, it's like following a thread and then seeing what happens. But I think you can push it. Like I realized I was writing another group of poems about like a lot about hauntings, and then I was like, okay, that is a conscious choice, and now I do it. So I think it can be subconscious or conscious, but I guess my main piece of advice around how you put it together would be, for me at least, like write over the amount that you end up with. Like I think that I have like maybe like there's like got like I think like 40 poems or something in here, but I probably had like 90 poems, because sometimes you might think, oh, that doesn't quite fit, or like I actually love that poem, but it's sort of like extraneous within the shape of the collection. So it's like writing a lot more than you actually end up with, and that's quite a helpful process for editing too, because it's like whittling it down, and but there could always be different expressions. Like this pamphlet could be in a different order, I'm sure it'd be fine. Story. So.
But the order of poems within a collection is actually quite important as well, and it is part of the editing process.
Yeah, definitely. There's a poet called Jacob Rose who says that like if you have 13 poems or 12 poems, and a 13th poem is the order. So so I think it is really important. But at the same time, like people often say like a poem's never finished, and I think that there's always different possibilities with work. Like it's never like, oh, that's it, and there's that's the final form. It has no different forms. It would just be different. And I think at some point you have to be like, what, I'm happy with it at this moment in time. That's good fun.
Yeah.
Well.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
Is there another question from the audience? Yes.
Um, yeah, I think it definitely has. I think a lot of what I've explored with poetry has come from like a fashion interest. Or, like, yeah, exactly. I think like sort of like having like a fixation on something and then being able to explore it through poetry. And also I guess like I definitely feel like it has well because I think like I have a lot of like sensory sensitivity and like I get like really stressed by noise and stuff. But then I actually think that like especially when writing about nature that has really shaped how I write about it because I think there's a lot of stuff that I pick up on. Like I'll often say to someone like, "Oh, did you notice that noise?" Or like this tiny thing on a walk, and I'll be like, "No." So I think like it's different. I think it definitely has, and also I think it's like made poetry like feel really important to me in terms of figuring things out. I think especially about looking at things from the past. It's been a way of like figuring out, yes, I actually thought and felt about something. But like I think I've talked quite a lot about this section in some context saying like I definitely didn't always feel that. Like I think I felt like poetry like wasn't for me in the way that we were kind of taught poetry in school. Like it's not that I didn't like it, it just felt like very removed, like not really to do with my life at all. And I think it's been really important in that way of being like, actually I can write a poem about this, I can write a poem about vampire diaries, I can write about Teen Wolf, because I think that was not, I would have said poetry is interesting at school, it's fine. I wouldn't have thought like it can like really like speak to my life. And I think some of the nice things people said to me about this is like a couple of people said like, oh, I really recommend this book to people who like don't think poetry's for them or like don't like poetry or like things that they just like never connected with it. Because for me like that's really beautiful because I do think poetry is for everybody. Like without sounding cliche, like I genuinely do think that. Like not all poetry, but like there's gonna be some, I do believe there's gonna be some poetry out there for someone that's gonna like everybody that's gonna really speak to them. And like when that happened to me and I read poetry, I really liked it. Was genuinely really life changing. So I think just to be like, to like be told by people who don't love poetry as a whole that they really like it, that's like really fascinating.
I always think that if you have feelings, you can read and write poetry.
Like, I think everyone can write poetry too. I genuinely like really firmly believe that. I know people probably feel like they can't, and I think I massively felt like I can't. But then actually, I sort of started and then it was just like doing it on the notes of my phone. Like it can be,
Is there another question? No. Well, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the Writing Happiness Project.
Yeah, so this is something I run with a friend and collaborator, very close friend, Rachel Lewis, and this is something that we wanted to start because we kind of felt that for a lot of, I don't know, like what, like there's a lot of words to describe writers who maybe are not so much in the mainstream, like underrepresented writers or marginalized writers or whatever word you want to use it for marginalized writers, there often is an expectation that you kind of are writing either from a place of like your own trauma, which you touched on a lot tonight and can be quite harmful in terms of an expectation from the publishing industry, or like that you have to be like an inspiration, like if you're going to write about something happy, it's got to be like really inspirational or like sort of wholly positive and things. So we just kind of realized this limitation, and we kind of like annoyed about it on a personal level, and then we ended up deciding we were going to run a series of workshops on writing happiness and kind of talking about writing about happiness from a sort of like complex and nuanced point of view. Like it doesn't have to be like wholly happy, but like in all work there's going to be moments of joy, and in a way that makes the moments which are perhaps distracting hit so much harder as well. We're thinking about it from sort of like writing craft perspective. And we ran a series of workshops for deaf, disabled and neurodivergent writers with Spread the Word, who are London's kind of leading literary organisation. And that was really cool. And like the response to it has just been like really amazing. Like a lot of writers I keep feeling like it kind of gave them space to explore things that they hadn't before. So kind of fun.
Any questions? Yes, at the back.
Thanks very much, Ellie. I think it was really interesting reading a poem where you were reflecting on the fact that you were the new girl in school, and I very much remember the day where you were the new girl in school and it leads to fashion. And I'm also a big fan of the kind of saying, your comfort zone will kill you. Do you feel that sort of starting a new school, coming into a new school that was kind of friendship groups were established, that sort of experience, do you feel that influenced any of your writing or kind of generated a spark in terms of creativity?
Well, that's actually such a good question. Thank you. I think like when I was writing this poetry, I was definitely thinking about like the different personas that you have in life and like how you can sort of like put them on. And obviously that's something you can kind of do for writing as well, which is interesting. And I think I do really remember like going to a new school for like context. I got a scholarship to go to a school and it was like a really different vibe from the secondary school that I'd been at before. And I do remember like really consciously thinking like I can like almost like curate who I am in this like new place. And I'm like quite fascinated by that as an idea. And I think you have these moments in your life where you're like, who am I going to almost like choose to be? But then you can make a choice and not realize the consequences of it at the time, maybe for like actually expressing yourself authentically or like being, yeah. So I think that is definitely something that I like reflected on a lot in this collection, is like that feeling of like of newness and kind of thinking, yeah, just like the kind of like I guess like ways you can get like a bit trapped in a certain perception of you when you're younger as well, and like how like that's so sort of like unleashing in a way, but then you realize like there's all this sort of like subtle violence that has kind of happened in like when you're growing up. And I think that yeah, I do definitely think that like that feeling of newness and like the opportunity of like kind of like creating a new self is something that does always really fascinate me. And I think having like been in quite a few kind of like different places or like different sort of spheres as a writer is really helpful as well, because I think like it's like this feeling maybe that you're a bit in between different things in like a lot of ways, but I think from a writing perspective that can actually be pretty helpful to kind of like give you insight, and like maybe it's uncomfortable for you but like being in that in-betweenness I think can help me as a writer.
Any other questions? I was wondering, what is next with your writing?
Well, I'm writing a novel which is like very nearly finished. So I write quite a lot of different things. I write like prose, I write arts criticism. I feel like I kind of enjoy writing lots of different things, which is fun, but can also feel like my brain is being pulled in a lot of different directions. So yeah, but in terms of poetry, like I say, I've written a collection, edited it, and I'm happy with it. And that's much more about nature, and I suppose like growing up in sort of semi-rural environment, and like what like sort of those boundaries and binaries that we often create around nature. Like I know like what semi-rural like even mean, you know, but it's like a category that people use, and like what this sort of like wild and urban kind of that, writing a lot around that. And then as I say, I've also just finished a series of poems about hauntings and kind of imagining the body through a series of hauntings. So that's kind of what I hope is next. But like as I say, like there's so much redaction all the time in writing, so it's hard to know where you'll be going. All you can do is keep like writing the work and like enjoying it. I think. Yeah. That's
very good. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I'm pleased with it. I'm editing at the moment, so when it's edited, you can read it.
And so if no one has any further questions, no, then would you like to read us some more poems?
Yes, definitely. I will read The Economy of Love. You said that was your favourite poem, Carrie. I'm Friday. Need to find it. Yeah, I'll finish on Friday, and I'll read. Yeah, I'll read it from start to start. So yeah, this is The Economy of Love. I believe that my body was born whole and fractured. I believe that 2 + 2 = 4, and that people are not equations. I believe that I can add you up and still you're a subtraction. I believe that there is an X inside my head, but it doesn't knock a spot, and trigonometry won't help me solve it. I believe that if numbers can turn from negative to positive, then so can life. I believe that you can be one full circle and have complex segments. I believe that the economy of love is baked and does not need to be rationed. Scarcity is a false principle. I will nationalize my heart and feed it to girls hungry for acceptance. I believe that you are sorry. I believe that for myself and not for you. I believe that I can figure out my own rules and fill in my own blanks. I believe that love plus love equals more than the sum of my parts. Okay, I will read 60% of bisexual people are in psychological stress at any one time now, because I read the title already. And that is actually a true fact that I did glean from I read such paper, so there are some facts in poetry. The scalloped edge of the bra means the Roman sun burns my skin into a wave pattern. Once we were on the beach we had made from the sandbox in your garden. Once your boob sat in this bra, not quite filling it, an electric gap between you and the lake. The lawn had been mowed, sweet smell escaping. We tried each other out for size, my pasty flesh spilling out of your bikini top as we sat in the mosaic sun of your patio. Your aunt inside the house, hoping its tidy perfection would rub off in her mind. Your father trampling across the grass cuttings, leaving us upon seeing the sight of us, declaring he didn't want a heart attack at 40. Three of those oppressive white walls, we laughed and laughed, our torsos shaped around each other like cutting meant for a trellis. Now my sperm still aches with the touch of you, my skin less hot from the sun than when your fingers left their mark upon it. I think, yeah, I've got time to, yeah. Okay, I'm going to read a poem called In Sims, I Woohoo with a Girl. And for people who've not played The Sims, I think you can leave it up to your imagination what woohooing is. So this is In Sims, I Woohoo with a Girl. The green diamond floats above your head, your very own bar sign, an invitation to express affection and touch fondly, and maybe even express undying love for on our second date. You bring the experience and I bring the giant vibrating bed, the love heart, and a fun rating of 10. Your aspiration is to woohoo with 15 Sims, and I am a willing lump under purple sheets. Fireworks explode as my hands touch the mouth, like again, again, again. Shall I finish with poem?
Yeah.
Another small one. Okay. Let me find another small one. Okay, this is mentioned Taylor Swift. So this is called We All Have Side Fringes in 2010. So we all have side fringes in 2010, and we all have empty space beside our hearts where our bras gape and tissues bustle. Your arms jiggle in the strip lights of your all-white kitchen as we drag each other upwards through air as Taylor tells us, speak now. My fingers dance with yours in secret as beer is thrown over the lens that caught us. That camera never worked again. Sorry, Mum, but I didn't need any external electricity to capture the love-shaped red wine stains on your snake print jeans. And I will finish with Pride, which is the last poem in the collection. This is called Pride. The rustling of sweet packets and the green fire sign threaten to upset the delicate balance in my brain, but that cinema smell of leather tells me to keep going. It says you don't know what you might find. You don't yet know all the things you're made of, all the pretty colors of dreams and fights and laughter and breakups and orgasms and hangovers and protests and tears and parties. Not just pinks and blues. Hope is on the big screen as I bite into my Ben & Jerry's cookie dough, not knowing my life will be changed in the next 120 minutes. Not knowing that aloneness is forced upon us, a carving knife between the ribs. Not knowing that the first step against their tactics is to reach across the soft fabric of the seat and clasp her hand. The first time is in darkness, but the next will be in light.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this evening of poetry, as it's now known with hand gesture. Thank you so much to the team at Lighthouse Books for hosting us tonight and for being absolutely brilliant. And thank you to Andres and Sarah for reading their wonderful, wonderful poem, making this evening so special. You can buy the collections of each of the poets at the till and also support independent bookshops. Isn't that amazing? And the authors will be here to sign copies as well if you'd like to do that. So yeah, congratulations, Elspeth, on launching this amazing book. And one last time.